You ever felt like your mind works differently, not better, not worse, just different? Like you see things other people completely miss. You read people without them speaking. You feel danger before it happens. And somehow that didn't come from books. It came from pain. There's a type of intelligence no school teaches, no degree proves it, and no one talks about it because it's born in chaos. Yeah. It's called traumatic intelligence. And if you have it, you didn't choose it, you survived your way into it. Let's get into the signs. Number one, you read people instantly. You don't meet people. You scan them, their tone, their micro expressions, the way they pause. You pick up everything. Because at some point in your life, reading people wasn't optional. It was survival. Number two, you overthink everything, but it saves you. People call it overthinking. But for you, it's pattern recognition. You don't just think about what's happening. You think about what could happen. And more often than not, you're right. Number three, you stay calm in chaos when things go wrong, others panic. You don't, because your nervous system has already been through worse. Chaos feels familiar. And in that moment, you become the most dangerous person in the room because you're the calmest. Number four, you don't trust easily. It's not insecurity. It's memory. You've seen what people are capable of. You've learned that words don't mean much without patterns behind them. So you trust slowly and carefully. Number five, you feel everything deeply but show very little inside. It's intense. Outside, you look controlled. You've mastered emotional containment. Because at some point, showing too much wasn't safe. Number six, you notice small changes others ignore, a slight shift in someone's voice, a delayed reply, a forced smile. You catch it instantly because your brain has been trained to detect threats disguised as normal. Number seven, you prefer being alone, not because you hate people, but because peace feels rare. Solitude is where your mind resets, where you don't have to analyze, adjust, or protect yourself. Number eight, you struggle to turn your mind off even when everything is okay. Your brain doesn't relax. It scans, it prepares, it calculates because it learned that danger doesn't announce itself. Number nine, you adapt faster than others. New environment, new people, new pressure. You adjust quickly.
Because your past forced you to become flexible or break. Number 10, you see through lies even when you wish you didn't. You don't just hear words.
You feel inconsistency, and sometimes you wish you were wrong, but deep down you already know the truth. Here's the part no one tells you. This kind of intelligence comes with a cost. It's heavy. It's exhausting. And sometimes it feels isolating. But it's also powerful because while others are guessing, you're understanding. While others react, you're prepared. You didn't just survive what happened to you. You adapted in a way most people never will. So if you see yourself in these signs, don't just call it trauma. Recognize it for what it is, a mind that was forced to evolve. And the real question is, now that you've developed this level of awareness, what are you going to do with it? Pain doesn't just leave scars, it rewires the way your mind sees the world. And most people will never understand that because they've never had to think with their survival on the line. When you go through something intense enough, your brain stops operating like everyone else's. It starts prioritizing patterns, signals, shifts in behavior that most people ignore because their reality never demanded that level of awareness. You didn't sit in a classroom and learn this. You didn't read it in a book. You didn't choose it to or forced into it. Shaped by moments where missing one small detail could cost you emotionally, mentally, or even physically. And that kind of pressure doesn't just hurt you, it trains you at a level most people will never reach. Your mind becomes faster, not in a loud or obvious way, but in a quiet, almost invisible calculation that's always running in the background. You walk into a room and instantly feel the energy before a single word is spoken. You notice the hesitation in someone's voice, the micro delay in their response, the slight tension in their body language, and your brain connects it to something deeper without needing time to think. People around you might call it overthinking, but they don't realize you're not guessing, you're recognizing patterns your mind has already stored from past experiences. What they see as anxiety is often precision, built from repetition, carved into your thinking by situations that demanded you pay attention or suffer the consequences. Pain compresses learning into moments most people would collapse under. Where others need years of comfortable experience to understand human behavior, you learned it in silence, in tension, and environments where trust was fragile and consistency was rare. You didn't have the luxury of taking things at face value, so your brain adapted by reading between the lines. It started asking questions automatically. Why did their tone change? Why did that reaction feel off? Why does this situation remind me of something that didn't end well before? And the more you went through, the sharper those questions became until they turned into instinct. This kind of intelligence isn't clean or organized like academic knowledge. You know, it's messy, emotional, sometimes overwhelming, but it's incredibly accurate. It operates in layers, processing not just what is happening, but what it could mean, what it could lead to, what it reminds you of, and how it might unfold. That's why you often feel ahead of situations, like you're watching something play out before it fully happens. It's not because you're imagining things, it's because your brain has been trained to anticipate outcomes based on subtle cues others don't even register. And the truth is, this didn't come for free. Every bit of awareness you have was paid for with experiences that pushed you beyond comfort, beyond stability, beyond what most people consider normal. Your intelligence was built in environments where you had to adapt quickly, where staying the same wasn't an option. You had to read moods, predict reactions, adjust your behavior, sometimes shrink yourself, sometimes stand your ground, all depending on what the situation demanded. Over time, your brain stopped asking whether it should do these things and just started doing them automatically. That's why you can walk away from conversations feeling like you understood more than what was said. You pick up on contradictions, on things that don't align, on emotions that don't match words, And even when you try to ignore it, there's a part of your mind that keeps analyzing, keeps connecting dots, keeps building a bigger picture. It's not something you can just turn off because it was never meant to be optional. It was built as a survival mechanism, and survival doesn't come with an off switch. People who haven't experienced this kind of pressure often misunderstand it. They think you're too sensitive, too cautious, too intense. They don't see the intelligence behind it because it doesn't look like traditional intelligence. It doesn't show up in test scores or structured conversations. It shows up in instincts and timing, in decisions that feel almost automatic but are actually the result of deep subconscious processing. You might not always be able to explain how you know something, but you know it with a certainty that's hard to ignore. Pain also teaches you efficiency. When you've been in situations where your mental energy had to be used carefully, your brain learns to prioritize what matters. You start filtering out noise, focusing on signals, identifying what's real and what's just distraction. That's why you can sometimes cut through confusion faster than others, seeing the core of a problem while everyone else is still trying to understand the surface. It's not because you're trying harder, it's because your brain has been trained to look for what matters most under pressure. At the same time, this kind of intelligence can feel isolating because it changes how you relate to people. You see layers they don't even know they're showing, and that creates a gap between your perception and their awareness. You might find it hard to fully relax around others because part of your mind is always observing, always evaluating, always trying to understand what's beneath the surface. And while that keeps you safe, it can also make connection feel complicated because you're rarely just experiencing the moment you're analyzing it. But there's a power in this that most people overlook. The same mind that was shaped by pain is capable of incredible clarity, insight, and adaptability. You've developed a way of thinking that isn't limited to what's obvious. You can navigate complex emotional landscapes, understand unspoken dynamics, and respond in ways that are calculated without being cold. That's not weakness, that's a form of intelligence that comes from depth, from experience, from having seen both sides of human behavior. And even though it may feel like this part of you was forced into existence, it doesn't mean it has to control you forever. The awareness you gain through pain can become a tool instead of a burden when you start recognizing it for what it is. Instead of seeing it as something that makes you different in a negative way, you can start seeing it as something that gives you an edge and ability to understand, to adapt, to move through situations with a level of insight that others simply don't have. Because at the end of the day, your mind didn't break under pressure, it evolved under it. It found ways to process faster, to see deeper, to protect you in environments that weren't built for comfort. And while that journey may not have been fair or easy, it created something rare. A way of thinking that isn't taught, isn't given, but forged through experience, shaped by moments that demanded more from you than most people will ever have to give. Hyper-awareness doesn't arrive gently. It crashes into your life and refuses to leave, turning every moment into something you feel more deeply than the people around you can even comprehend. You don't just notice things, you absorb them. Every shift in tone, every flicker of emotion, every subtle inconsistency that most people overlook without a second thought. Your mind doesn't skim the surface of reality. It dives beneath it, pulling up meanings, intentions, and possibilities that others never even consider. And while that gives you an edge, it also means you carry a weight they will never have to hold. You walk into a room and before anyone speaks, you already sense what's off. The tension in someone's shoulders, the forced nature of a smile, the silence that feels louder than noise. You pick it all up instantly, not because you're trying to, but because your brain has been trained to scan for it automatically. It's like your awareness is always turned all the way up, constantly collecting data, constantly processing, constantly trying to understand what's really going on beneath what's being shown. And while others can relax into a moment without questioning it, you're reading it, analyzing it, feeling it from multiple angles at once. That level of awareness gives you an almost unsettling accuracy when it comes to people. You can sense when someone isn't being genuine, even if they say all the right things. You can feel when something is about to shift, when a situation is about to turn, when an energy in the room is slowly changing direction. It's not magic, it's not luck, it's the result of your mind recognizing patterns it has seen before, connecting dots faster than you can consciously explain. And most of the time you're right, even when you wish you weren't. But here's the part no one prepares you for. The same awareness that helps you see everything also makes it impossible to ignore anything. You don't have the luxury of being unaware. You can't just brush things off or pretend not to notice what feels wrong. Once you see it, once you feel it, it stays with you, looping in your mind, demanding to be understood. Your brain doesn't like loose ends. It doesn't like unanswered questions, so it keeps working, keeps analyzing, keeps trying to make sense of things long after everyone else has moved on. That's where the burden begins to show. Because while others can switch off, you can't. Your mind doesn't have a simple pause button. Even in moments that are supposed to be calm, there's a part of you that stays alert, that keeps scanning, that keeps preparing for something you can't even fully define. It's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain because from the outside, it doesn't look like you're doing anything at all. But internally, your brain is running at full speed, processing layers of information that most people don't even realize exist. And the deeper this awareness goes, the more it affects how you experience emotions. You don't just feel things, you feel the layers behind them. You feel what someone says, what they mean, and what they're trying to hide all at once. You pick up on emotional contradictions, on suppressed feelings, on things left unsaid, and it creates a kind of intensity that can be overwhelming. It's like living in a world where everything has extra meaning, where nothing is ever just simple, where even small interactions can carry a weight that lingers long after they're over. This is why you might find it hard to fully trust moments that seem peaceful. Part of you is always questioning, always checking if what you're experiencing is real, if it's stable, if it's going to last. You've seen how quickly things can change, how easily situations can shift, so your mind stays prepared even when there's no immediate immediate reason to be. It's not pessimism, it's conditioning your brain learned that being caught off guard comes at a cost, so it tries to make sure that never happens again. At the same time, this awareness gives you a kind of clarity that others struggle to reach. You can cut through confusion, see through manipulation, understand motivations that aren't being openly expressed. You don't just react to what's happening, you understand why it's happening, and that changes how you respond. You're less likely to be easily influenced, less likely to be fooled by surface level appearances because you're always looking deeper, always questioning what's beneath. But that clarity can also create distance. When you see things others don't, it becomes harder to relate to the way they experience the world. You might feel like you're on a different wavelength, like you're processing reality at a different depth, and that can make connection feel complicated. You might hold back what you notice because you know it would sound strange or intense to someone who doesn't see what you see. You might choose silence over explanation because it's easier than trying to translate something that feels so instinctive to you. And then there's the emotional exhaustion that comes from carrying all of this. Because being hyper-aware means you don't just process your own experiences, you pick up on the emotions of others as well. You feel the tension they try to hide, the stress they don't express, the sadness they mask with normal behavior. And even when it's not your responsibility, it still affects you, still adds to the weight you're already carrying. It's like your mind doesn't have a filter for what belongs to you and what doesn't. So it all comes in, all gets processed, all becomes part of your internal experience. Despite all of this, there's a strength in hyper-awareness that shouldn't be ignored. It gives you the ability to navigate situations with precision, to make decisions based on deeper understanding, to protect yourself in ways that go beyond simple logic. You're not just reacting to life, you're anticipating it, preparing for it, adjusting to it in real time. That kind of adaptability is rare, and it comes from the same awareness that sometimes feels like a burden. The key is recognizing that this awareness doesn't have to control you completely. It can be something you use, something you direct, something you learn to manage instead of something that constantly overwhelms you. Because while your mind may be wired to notice everything, you can still choose what to focus on, what to give energy to, what to let go of. That doesn't mean turning off your awareness. That means learning how to live with it in a way that doesn't drain you. And when you start to understand that balance, something shifts. The same awareness that once felt like too much starts to feel like something you can handle. You begin to trust your ability to process without getting lost in it, to observe without being consumed by what you see. You realize that this part of you, as intense as it is, isn't just a source of exhaustion, it's also a source of insight, of depth, of understanding that most people will never develop. Because hyper-awareness is never just one thing. It's not purely a gift and it's not purely a burden. It's both at the same time, constantly shifting between helping you and challenging you depending on how you relate to it. And the more you learn about it, the more you understand how it works, the more you can start to shape it into something that serves you instead of something that weighs you down. Survival didn't just get you through what you faced, it reshaped the way you think, the way you move, the way you respond to everything around you, turning what was once a necessity into something that can become your greatest advantage. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be strong, adaptable, or aware. Those traits were built in moments where you had no other option, where staying the same would have broken you, where you had to adjust faster than you were ready for. And in those moments, something inside you shifted from reacting to evolving, from enduring to learning, from surviving to becoming something sharper than before. There's a difference between people who grow in comfort and people who grow in pressure. Comfort teaches slowly, gently, often without urgency. Pressure compresses everything into seconds, forcing your mind to make decisions, to interpret signals, to adjust behavior without hesitation. You became someone who could read a situation and respond in real time, not because it was impressive, but because it it was necessary. And over time, that necessity turned into ability, that ability turned into instinct, and that instinct became part of who you are. You learned how to adapt before you even understood what adaptation meant. You figured out how to change your tone, your energy, your reactions, depending on who you were dealing with and what the situation required. You became flexible in ways that others struggle to comprehend, able to shift between different versions of yourself to maintain control, to stay safe, to keep things from escalating. And while that may have started as a defense mechanism, it also built a level of versatility that can't be easily taught or replicated. This is where survival begins to transform into power. Because once you're no longer in those situations, once the immediate need to protect yourself isn't as constant, you're left with a set of skills that most people never had to develop. You can handle pressure without freezing. You can think clearly when things get complicated. You can adjust your approach when something isn't working. And all of that comes from a mind that has already been tested in ways that forced it to evolve. But here's the part that most people miss. Just because something helped you survive doesn't mean it automatically knows how to serve you in a different environment. The same instincts that once protected you can start to feel overwhelming when they're no longer needed at the same intensity. You might find yourself reacting to situations as if they carry the same level of threat as your past, even when they don't. You might hold on to control more tightly than necessary, analyze more deeply than required, prepare for outcomes that aren't likely to happen. And that's not because you're broken, it's because your mind learned to operate at a level where being unprepared was never an option. Turning survival into power means recognizing this difference. It means understanding that the skills you developed are real, valuable, and powerful, but they need direction. Without that direction, they can turn inward, creating stress, overthinking, and emotional exhaustion. With direction, they become tools, precision, awareness, resilience, adaptability. The same ability that once kept you alert in difficult environments can now help you navigate opportunities, relationships, and challenges with a level of clarity that others don't have. You've already proven that you can endure. That's not the question anymore. The question is whether you can take that endurance and shape it into something intentional. Because surviving teaches you how to react, but power comes from learning how to choose your response. It comes from deciding when to use your awareness and when to step back, when to adapt and when to stay grounded, when to trust your instincts and when to question them. It's about taking control of the system that once ran automatically and learning how to operate it consciously. There's a moment where everything begins to shift, where you realize that you're not in the same place anymore, that the conditions that shaped you are no longer the ones you're living in. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can continue to let your past define how you respond to everything, or you can start redefining what those responses mean. You can take the awareness, the adaptability, the strength, and begin to apply them in ways that move you forward instead of just keeping you protected. This isn't about ignoring what you went through or pretending it didn't affect you. It's about acknowledging that it did affect you, that it changed you, and that within that change, there's something you can use. You developed a level of mental endurance that allows you to keep going when others stop. But, you built a capacity to handle complexity, to sit with uncertainty, to navigate situations that don't have clear answers. Those are not small things. Those are abilities that, when directed properly, can become the foundation of something much greater than survival. The process isn't instant, and it isn't always easy. There will be moments where your instincts feel louder than your logic, where your awareness feels like too much, where your past tries to pull you back into patterns that once kept you safe. But every time you recognize that pattern, every time you choose a response, instead of reacting automatically, you feel a sense of control and agency. You're taking a step toward transforming that survival into something more controlled, more intentional, more powerful. And the more you do that, the more you start to see yourself differently. Not as someone who was shaped only by what they went through, but as someone who took that experience and built something from it. Someone who didn't just endure pressure, but learned from it, adapted through it, and now has the ability to operate at a level that most people never reach. That's where the real shift happens, not in denying the past, but in using it as a foundation instead of a limitation. Because power isn't about never having been affected. It's about what you do with what affected you. You know, it's about taking the parts of yourself that were built in difficult moments and deciding how they fit into your life now. It's about understanding that while you didn't choose the conditions that shaped you, you can choose how those conditions continue to influence you moving forward. And when you fully step into that understanding, something changes in the way you carry yourself, in the way you think, in the way you respond to the world around you. There's a level of control that starts to replace the constant reaction, a sense of direction that replaces the automatic patterns. You're no longer just someone who survived or someone who learned how to take that survival and turn it into something that works for you, something that strengthens you, something that allows you to move through life with intention instead of just instinct.